The town of Caminha is a municipal seat located in the Alto Minho region, on the left bank of the mouth of the Minho River, the natural border that separates Portugal from the Spanish region of Galicia. Its border location forced it to protect itself with the construction of fortifications that evolved over the centuries. On the other hand, the town would find its main source of wealth in the nearby sea. Its historic center includes several interesting spaces and monuments, such as the convent of St. Anthony with a Baroque appearance, perched on a hill on the town's southern side. It was occupied by Capuchin Franciscan friars until the extinction of religious orders in the 19th century. In the 20th century it was a residence for sailors and later a college and novitiate. In the old Terreiro Square, now Conselheiro Silva Torres Square, we find a notable Renaissance-style fountain, which has been classified as a national monument since 1910. It was built between 1551 and 1553 by the master stonemason João Lopes the Elder, author of other important fountains, such as the one in Rainha Square in Viana do Castelo or in Plaza de Herreria in Pontevedra, Spain. It has two bowls, the largest fed by 6 spouts and the smallest by 4, both with carved faces. It is decorated with plant elements and is crowned with the spire, topped with the cross of the Order of Christ. Next to the same square, at the beginning of Corredora Street, is the Pita family house, a noble manor built between 1649 and 1652 in a late Manueline style, with a Baroque coat of arms. On its long facade, the elegant ogee arches of the windows on the first floor stand out, as well as the strip of decorative battlements that finish off its top, regularly interrupted by half-round gargoyles. Built on properties belonging to the Pitas estate, established in Aveiro in the 17th century, it has remained in the possession of the same family since then, functioning nowadays as a tourist accommodation. On the corner of the São João Street, we can see a granite stonework building with a Manueline lintel window. Right in front, next to the clock tower, the arcades of the old town hall, currently the local tourist office, stand out. On the right stands the striking facade of the Misericordia Church, whose construction began in 1559. From that time, the beautiful Renaissance main portal still exists, with a full arch and decorated with grotesques and arabesques. The portal is framed by an alfiz, where 2 medallions with the busts of Saint Cosmas and Saint Damian appear. On the top, the triangular pediment has a richly carved niche housing an image of Our Lady of Mercy. The interior of the church was profoundly altered and expanded in the 17th century, in the Baroque style, with its height being increased by 20 palms and windows being opened in its side and main walls. It has a longitudinal plan, with a single nave covered by a wooden coffered ceiling. The triumphal arch is round, being flanked by angled gilded altars. The main chapel is covered by a painted coffered ceiling, with symbolic decoration of Marian iconography framed in polychrome carvings. The main altar is elevated, dating from 1723, featuring a sculpted front that represents, in the center, the Visitation. On the central throne sits an image of Our Lady of Mercy. The walls feature a frieze made of patterned ceramic tiles in the Baroque style, in blue, yellow and white colors. On the wall on the Gospel side there's a gilded pulpit. The walls of the nave are lined with 18th century tiles. On both sides there are 2 confronting altarpieces in gilded woodwork, with the one on the Epistle side having an image of Ecce Homo and the one on the Gospel side having a crucified Christ. The choir loft has a U-shaped plan and is decorated with magnificently carved wood housing the choir stalls of the confreres and an organ supported by carved corbels. Below the choir there's a wooden windshield, which is flanked by holy water fonts, and its floor is paved in stone. In the rest of the space the floor is made of wood. Outside, the northwest facade of the temple is covered by a Renaissance loggia with an arcade on the ground floor and a balcony on the upper floor. There are epigraph stones on the pavement. This gallery faces the current Calouste Gulbenkian Square, where we can see a well. Here there was a tower of the old wall of Kamienia that was demolished at the end of the 17th century. A short distance away, on the corner between the Saint-Jouan Street and Lane, is the Chapel of St. John, built in the 16th century. Originally it was built on another location, having later been relocated to its current place. Its facade features a Renaissance portal with a round arch flanked by medallions with representations of human faces, in a set framed by two pilasters with fluted shafts. The interior, with a single nave, features an altar raised on two steps, in neoclassical style, with a polychrome carved altarpiece. It is protected by a wooden balustrade. An iconic symbol of Kamienia, the clock tower looms over Conselheiro Silvator Square. It protected the south-facing Vienna Gate, which was the entry point into the old medieval historic center. It is the only tower remaining from the town's original fence, featuring an evocative inscription surmounted by an image of Our Lady of Conception, donated by King John IV of Portugal, and the coat of arms of Portugal. It has a square floor plan in regular stone masonry and is divided into 3 floors: the ground floor, where the door is located, and 2 upper ones, the last one crowned by merlins. On the rear facade, facing Ricardo Joaquim de Sousa Street, formerly Direita Street or Middle Street, the passage is framed by a pointed arch, above which was a door with a stone balcony. This was the keep of the fortification erected by order of King Afonso III, which was completed in 1260. It originally contained a total of 13 towers, this being the only one that survived. On the 2 floors inside, which today house the Museum of the Historic Center of Kamienia, there is an audiovisual room as well as an exhibition of scale models of the town's main monuments. Among the objects on display, a granite slab with an inscription, dated 1260, commemorating the completion of the walls, stands out. It came from the disappeared Gate of the Sun, which faced west. In 1597, a bell was placed here, which was replaced by another in 1610 due to the previous one having cracked, leaving it sheltered in the pyramidal structure that crowns the top of this tower. In 1673, a public clock was installed at the top of the structure, which then became known as the Clock Tower. The dial that we can still see today dates from 1889. Visiting the upper level of the tower allows beautiful panoramic views over Kamienia and its surrounding landscape, including the Minho River, the town of La Guardia, and the Mount of Santa Trega in Galicia, and the Atlantic Ocean. Classified as a national monument since 1951, the clock tower underwent restoration and requalification in 2008 and was then opened to the public. Our route through the historic center of Kamienia then progresses along the Old Straight Street, or Middle Street, the central artery of the medieval town, where we can still find beautiful examples of civil architecture. The most notable are granite stonework houses built during the 16th and 17th centuries and featuring several finely carved manualine elements in the frames of the doors and windows. The origins of the town of Kamienia date back to Roman times in the 3rd or 4th centuries, being assumed that its walls were built on foundations from that time. In the 5th century, after the Suebi invasion, the toponyms Kamenai or Kamina appeared. In 1060, Ferdinand I of Leon defined Kamienia as the seat of a county that he called Caput Mini. During the Middle Ages, Kamienia's involvement in practices linked to the sea became more pronounced, including shipbuilding and coastal navigation, as well as mercantile and fishing activities. As mentioned previously, King Afonso III's walls were completed in 1260. On July 24, 1284, King Denis of Portugal granted the inhabitants with a charter, creating the municipality of Kamienia. The urban structure of the village, in its medieval center, was originally planned following the French Bastide urban model in an orthogonal grid. Three parallel streets crossed the major axes, the central one being the Direita or Middle Street, intersecting with 3 lanes on the minor axis, dividing the town into rectangular lots. The town remained in the possession of the crown until June 1, 1371, the date on which King Ferdinand of Portugal established the county of Kamienia, with Álvaro Pires de Castro being made its first count. In 1390, King John I donated it to Fernão Martins Coutinho, simultaneously granting the privilege of tax exemption, a measure that significantly developed the commercial aspect of the town. On the main streets of the old village, merchants gradually built these houses decorated with artistic facades, which were a symbol of their power and prosperity. These buildings were generally structured on 2 floors, with the upper floor serving as housing and the lower corresponding to a vast store connected to the street through the main door. These ground floors were used to store household utensils, ox carts, and most likely as a warehouse for goods. In the back there was usually a backyard. The town extended outside the old walled area, expanding to the south, but it was here that, after the 17th century, some owners continued to build their manors. Changes in combat techniques, which began to be based on artillery, determined the creation of new kinds of walls of the Vauban type, which delimited a much wider area within which Kamienia grew. During the Restoration War, 1640 to 1668, the medieval walled core of Kamienia was reinforced, expanded and modernized with an extensive line of bastions and turrets. Therefore, it received a new bastion in the northwest, which we can see here next to the parish church, and another to the south, integrating the works erected during the reign of King John I. In the first half of the 17th century, several towers and sections of medieval walls were demolished, making room for the construction of new buildings such as warehouses to serve the fortress. In 1739, only the clock tower and the Tower of Piety remained from the medieval enclosure. The latter would be demolished in 1837 by order of the city council to reuse the stone in the bridge over the Kora River. Thus, from the 17th century fortifications, this bastion in front of the parish church, a section of wall that surrounds the convent of St. Anthony, and another on the west side survived. The construction of the bastion of the parish church allowed for an expansion of the space in front of the temple, which originally had its western facade separated from the medieval wall by a narrow alley. The economic growth of Kamienia during the 15th century, boosted by shipbuilding and maritime trade, led the local population to undertake the construction of their own grand church. Building began in 1488 under the direction of the Biscayan and Galician architects Tomé de Tolosa and Francisco Fial, who were later joined by Juan de Tolosa and Pero Gallego. The royal patronage of King Manuel I would give new impetus to the work in the 16th century, in a long process that would only end in 1556 with the construction of the tower on the main facade. Over the course of almost 7 decades, the work would incorporate contrasting artistic and aesthetic influences that made the parish church of Kamienia one of the most fascinating monuments of its time. The temple, consecrated to Our Lady of the Assumption, is made of granite stonework and has a longitudinal plan consisting of 3 naves and a triple apse, with the main chapel being polygonal and the 2 apse chapels being square. The main facade faces west, being divided into 3 stepped bodies, the central one being taller and wider, separated by buttresses topped by pinnacles. The main portal has a round arch and is framed by a shallow alfiche on a pilaster, both being profusely decorated with arabesques, urns, grotesques and bestiary on the frieze. It is topped by a rose window, typical of Gothic architecture, which appears decorated in its inner circle with windings, and in the outer circle with what appear to be intertwined dolphins. This main portal, which could be inspired by the portico of the Royal Hospital of Santiago de Compostela, presents a structure that brings it closer to the concept of stone altarpiece. The growing influence of Italian architecture in the Iberian space led to the emergence of new artistic styles such as Plateresque, where elements of the flamboyant Gothic appear combined with others of a Renaissance nature. This mix of styles, a sign of a transition between different artistic and intellectual eras, appears clearly on this portal. The round arch, the medallions with human figures, the friezes and colonnades are typical of the Renaissance. On the other hand, the decoration is disconcerting, consisting of chimerical monsters that mix the animal and vegetable worlds, grotesque creatures that contrast with the serenity of the angelic figures. These elements indicate a coexistence between Christian moral teachings and profane imagery, with classical but also popular roots, inhabited by monstrous representations of sins and punishments. On the south facade of the parish church of Kamienia, the exceptional side portal stands out, magnificently carved and decorated, which is attributed by some to the master stonemason Juan de Tolosa. The fact that it is more elaborate than the axial portal may have occurred because the main facade originally faced the medieval wall, making the access route narrower. The side portal, facing the town and two important access roads, was used as the main entrance for decades, until the space in front of the church was enlarged. The portico, in a round arch, is flanked by two pilasters decorated with weapons and trophies, and is part of a deeper alfiege than that of the main portal. The portal is topped by a triangular pediment where the image of Our Lady of the Assumption, patron saint of Kamienia, pontificates, holding the child. At the top there's a representation of the crucified Christ. Above the cornice there are four niches that frame granite statues of the evangelists Saint Mark and Saint Luke, and the apostles Saint Peter and Saint Paul. The two medallions that flank the pediment represent, according to some, Adam and Eve. The medallions further down, flanking the top of the portal arch, may depict the busts of King Manuel I and Queen Maria of Aragon. This portal is fully integrated into the Renaissance style, standing out for its sculptural beauty and iconographic richness. The interior of the parish church of Kamienia is divided into three naves, the central one being taller and wider than the lateral ones, which are divided into 5 sections supported by 8 cylindrical columns. To the left of the main portal, on the Gospel side, there is a baptismal font. The spandrels of the arches in the central nave are covered with 17th century tiles with a carpet pattern. On the Gospel side we can find the small Chapel of Piety, accessible through a round arch between spires. It is covered by a ribbed vault supported by corbels. During the restoration carried out in this church between 2001 and 2008, a fresco painting was discovered here, dating from the mid-16th century, which is believed to represent Our Lady of the Rosary. It was hidden behind an altar dedicated to Our Lady of Sorrows from the 17th century. Although deteriorated, the remaining elements of this mural reveal an excellent quality of execution. Also in the nave on the Gospel side, on the wall of the church facing north, stands the most majestic of all its chapels, the Chapel of Good Jesus of the Mariners. It was built in 1511, making it quite possibly the first work of Renaissance architecture in Portugal. It has a square plan and is covered by a ribbed vault. It is accessible through a wide round arch with carved side pillars and 2 medallions containing sculptures of a male and female bust, perhaps alluding to the sponsors of its construction. On the walls there are traces of mural paintings in the shape of 2 tondi, paintings on a round support, one of them with a very faded representation of the Virgin and Child. The imposing gilded altarpiece was created in 1701 by the carver Manuel de Almeida from Barcelos and gilded by Manuel Fernandes de Oliveira from Guimarães. In it we can see the statue of Ecce Homo that in 1539 was caught by the nets of a group of fishermen from Kamienia. It was inside a belted trunk accompanied by 2 gilded silver chalices and embroidered vestments. The unusual event was interpreted by fishermen and the local community as a miracle, an offering from the Lord of Mariners to be placed in his chapel. In fact, it may have been a box thrown into the sea by English Catholics seeking to save these sacred objects from the destruction to which they would be subjected in the Anglican England of Henry VIII. On the back wall of the central nave, surrounding the rose window, we can see a set of tiles dating from 1670, featuring a total of 4 distinct patterns. Also in the central nave there are 2 magnificent facing pulpits in granite, faceted and standing on carved columns. Its creation dates back to the 17th century. The pulpit on the epistle side has an elaborate decoration that includes representations of the crucifix, Christ with the crown of thorns, and some putti, figures derived from the young Cupid. The pulpit on the Gospel side is incomplete, with only one of its faces decorated and bearing the date 1698. The iron stairs that gave access to the pulpits were removed during the restoration work carried out here during the 1930s. The apse chapel on the Gospel side is dedicated to Our Lady of the Rosary and is preceded by a pointed arch and covered by a ribbed vault of beautiful effect. Inside, the magnificent gilded altar representing the Tree of Jesse stands out, created in 1705 by the sculptor Manuel de Azevedo and placed there on the initiative of the confreres of the Guild of Our Lady of the Rosary. This tree constitutes an artistic representation of the family tree of Jesus Christ starting from Jesse, father of King David. It became a frequent motif in Christian art from the Middle Ages onwards. At the base appears a depiction of Jesse lying down, from which 12 branches emerge, ending in sculptures of the 12 kings of Judah. At the top, Our Lady appears with the child on her lap, kissing her. On the epistle side, the apse chapel is consecrated to the Blessed Sacrament. It features a sumptuous 17th century altar in gilded woodwork designed by Pedro Freire, depicting Jesus Christ and the 12 apostles. In the center, it has a rotating tabernacle created in 1674 by Francisco Fernandes. In the upper niche appear the figures of the psalmist, the priest, and wisdom. In the central one, the evangelists are portrayed, and in the lower one, there are 6 sculptures and a relief representing the steps of the Passion of Christ. The chancel has a polygonal floor plan covered by ribbed vault supported on corbels and with golden bosses at the intersection of the ribs. The walls have 2 thin windows that illuminate the interior. In the middle there's a crucifix flanked by images of Our Lady of Solitude and St. John. Below, on the altar, there's a 17th century sculpture of Our Lady of the Assumption. There was a 16th century altarpiece here, designed by the Galician carver Fernán Muñoz, which had paintings alluding to Calvary and the Passion of Christ. It was later replaced by a Baroque altarpiece. In 1932, during the intervention of the General Directorate of National Buildings and Monuments, the existing altarpiece was removed and sold, giving the main chapel its current appearance. One of the most important and impressive elements of the parish church of Caminha is the wooden ceiling that covers the entire central and side naves. Built in chestnut wood by the carver Fernán Muñoz from Tui, Galicia, it was completed on April 20, 1565, according to the inscription located in its central pine cone. The sublime alfarje ceiling, which reveals Mudéjar influences, constitutes one of the most important works of artistic carpentry ever created in Portugal. Over the side naves, the ceiling forms tracery beams and an arabesque frieze. Over the central nave there are stars and intertwined structures with small domes filled with pendants. It features in total 14 finials and a spectacular pine cone in the middle, and none of the patterns present in the 15 sections that compose this ceiling is ever repeated. The parish church of Kamienie was the subject of several restoration and remodeling campaigns, with the one carried out in the 1930s resulting in the removal of altarpieces, organs and the choir loft. Between 2002 and 2007 it was closed for important restoration and requalification works accompanied by archaeological research. This temple has been classified as a national monument since 1910. Thank you for discovering Portugal with us. If you liked the video, please click on the like button and subscribe to the channel to follow our new releases.